Uh,
Okay, Andy, I'm excited to talk to you about your results.
Thank you, Diana. I'm excited to learn about my results.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm happy to walk you through, but I am curious first and foremost, what resonated for you?
Yeah, so I did have a chance to take a look at my type 3 along with Action Center and a variety of other elements of this. And it's so interesting. You may or may not recall, I built my career in higher education running
That's
career
right.
centers. So I've done tons of interpretation, MBTI and strengths and the strong interest inventory. I'm now certified in DISC and the Saboteur assessment through positive intelligence. So as I look at these findings that we're going to talk about, it all makes sense.
That's
It's
it?
interesting, the
Okay.
more of this work we do, the more a pattern crystallizes in a
Mhm.
way. So I definitely saw that.
Yeah. Well, what's fun as well is you and I are both counter types. So it's a nice 8 and a humble 3. I mean, and those are not my terms. That's just sometimes what's associated with the counter types. So what's interesting as well is, depending on your knowledge of the Enneagram, there's also some added nuance there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like it was resonating. Anything in particular that you want us to spend more time on or linger on? I mean, I'm happy to take it from the top. I just like to see if
Yeah.
there's anywhere you want to start.
And I don't know if you'd like to do a screen share with that, or I have it handy as well, whatever works, because I'm surprised, Diana, there's more to it than I recognize. All of the different kind of layers
Mhm.
that go through, it's a lot to take in.
It is.
And the honesty is appealing to me because as this achievement oriented person, um, I like a lot of what I read and what I see, and I own that, and I'm proud of that. And then, of course, there are aspects that I probably need more work on. I need to think more about. The people piece as a coach um, is a little bit concerning to me, because if I'm so driven by action and production and the end game, I I could probably afford to spend more time connecting to the emotion with my husband, with my family and friends, and certainly with clients, where I know I tend to become very, what's our goal? Where are we going? Let's keep this moving. And there's a lot of that in me. I'm looking at the clock, and all of that. And certainly that's part of my type. So what I like about this is it's offering up insights and suggestions to sort of play in other spaces
Mhm.
that are not quite as natural to me.
Mhm. And beautiful reflection. I'm not surprised. It's one of my favorite things about 3. They're like, let's make this even better. Right? Like make me even stronger and better. And so many 3s that I know from a coaching perspective and also just from a self-development perspective are, how do I be even better so I serve better? So I hear that loud and clear.
Yes.
Um, Everyone has a center of expression that is most predominantly expressed. And I would actually say that having action as your first, it's going to mean that you're more intuitive, you move faster, you have a fire about you in your energy, which also you did score very high with type 7. So 7 and 3, both assertive types, more confident. They take up that space in a room. So while of course we can look at where do you want to grow or develop? As a very strengths-based leader, I would also say, I think a lot of people are missing the action expression. And so sometimes you even just being present in that and evoking that, what action can you take? What does this look like? May actually be a gift that you don't want to tone down.
Mm,
So just food for thought.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I like to look at is kind of what your assessment said. Then we look at how that resonates. What are we celebrating? And then of course you can reflect on, where you want to go with that. But also, as a 3, focusing on how do you be even better and a better version of yourself is of course going to be primary. Then also as a counter type 3, there's that kind of humility. It's not necessarily about what people think, but you put so much investment in your work and how the way your work speaks for you and your drive, not even legacy from a personal perspective, but what you have built. You also scored very high in 1, which means your expectations for yourself and your ability to be in line with your integrity, to reform things, to improve things. All of that is likely coming up.
Great. What does counter type mean, Diana?
Yeah, so great question. I probably should have read the definition. So I'm going to give you my definition, but counter type it's one of the 3 types based on the instinct. So one of the things that this assessment does is it layers your type 1 through 9 with your instinct. There's 3 different instincts. And then on top of that, there's one number of each type that shows up a little differently. So a lot of times 3s are very focused on image, being the best they can be. With the counter type self-preservation 3, you see a greater sense of humility. How can my work be the best it can be? Not necessarily wanting the attention that sometimes the other 3s kind of thrive in, that spotlight or the performance. So
Yeah.
it's not better, it's just a different variation. So sometimes people may not realize that you are a 3 because the counter type shows up a little bit differently.
Yeah.
For myself as an 8 social, people call us the nice 8s. We're more focused on the social experience. And so sometimes a little bit more palatable for people than just the kind of raw in your face that 8s tend to be, frankly, very unapologetic about.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but there are challenges with that because you likely have a very strong drive to be the best, while simultaneously it's important to you to be in line with your integrity and very humble. So sometimes that may feel in conflict. For me, there's a level of power and drive that I have, but then also figuring out, okay, how do I not intimidate these people? How do I not scare these people? How do I make sure I'm not overpowering these people? So there's a way that we have the advantages and disadvantages of our type, but there's almost a different angle that we look at it as the counter type. And I just think it's kind of fun that we're both a little bit different. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So you may find at times when you're listening to something. So for example, if you're not already familiar with Sleeping at Last, he did a podcast episode for each of the types. You may find sometimes when people describe type 3 that it won't resonate with you quite as much. It fits, but it's almost like it was tailored for you at a different size. So when like the Beatrice Chestnut wrote 9 Types of Leadership, what I like about that, especially with your leadership background and as you coach, what I like about that is that she'll talk about type 3, but then she'll talk about each of the instincts for type 3. It's like a little flavor. There are some people in the Enneagram who actually see the instinct work as even more important than the types, but it creates a kind of fascinating combination. And the page in your report, which I think is the most relevant page in the report, page 11 takes your type and your instinct and layers them on top of each other. And it's usually like, whoa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be page 11 does that. And then underneath that, there'll be recommendations. So that can be, I know there's a lot in that report, but that's sometimes a nice place to start.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. So you scored highest in Action Center. So you likely have a intuitive fire heat that you're able to just kind of show up and make things happen and get things done. Does that resonate with you?
It does. It
Okay.
does. Yeah. And it resonates in the action, the lack of patience, I guess, when things move slowly.
Sure.
When I feel there is inefficiency, time wasted, people not getting their butts in gear, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things the report looks at is which of the action centers, so the 891, those are the action-oriented types, you scored the highest in. And not highest as in kind of better or best, but just in which one matches the most. So your action style is type 1. So you have a very strong sense of what you need to be doing, that high integrity, there can be that kind of critical element. You may be more comfortable with telling people what they need to do to move faster or to be better. It seems like just from your body language that you may feel a little apologetic about that.
Yes, I think that's true.
Okay. So I think that that's something to just for you to consider, is that's coming up as your strength and your superpower. And your strengths, our strengths and overuse tend to be our blind spots. So yeah, we want to be careful. But from, a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, we also I haven't seen as many people who score highest in the action center. And then with your high score in the action center, and and as a one, you're trying to, another word for one is the reformer, right? The strict perfectionist. So be careful with your standards, and if your standards are too high, but you have a strong dose of making things better. And it sounds like in your career, it also speaks to that. So be mindful, be discerning as you look at these things, to not only look at what's the negative aspect of it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Action is interesting as you talk about it. I did just a personal journal entry a couple of hours ago, due to some business disappointments that I've had in the last couple of days, just to reflect on those. And the topic was standards, and these high standards that I've always taken great pride in. My husband Skip is the same way. And I'm feeling like, whether it is me aging or the world changing, and my client base, and this is all college and university folks at UCLA and beyond, that I'm giving hall passes in a way when back in the day I wouldn't have done that. And I get that we're coming out of a pandemic and that things are quirky and clunky and rusty, and people are quietly quitting. But this action is superpower I like, because I feel like as a coach, I'm letting people off the hook a lot more than perhaps I should, to really serve them and help them identify a meaningful impact. Because I'm a super nice guy. I'm just a super nice guy. And so I want to spend some more time thinking about this, because I find myself too often disappointed in people. What do you think about that? I mean, that's kind of an awful statement to make.
I don't think so. I think that's an honest statement. And I think my sense of, our limited time together, but also what your assessment says, is you likely don't believe in a hall pass for yourself.
I don't.
And so since you don't believe in a hall pass for yourself, even if you're trying to give one based on the time or the compassion, or if it feels necessary, there's a part of you that likely feels like forgiving a standard won't help. And there are times and needs for hall passes, and there are also times where forgiving the standard doesn't help someone long term.
Yeah, sure.
So from a achievement as the high achiever, and from an integrity perspective, it sounds like the hall pass is grading for you.
Yeah.
But in your care about people, that you're trying to be adaptable. So what I would just offer is that from an ICF coaching perspective, if we look at our clients as resourceful and whole, you can ask them, hey, what are you looking for? You looking for a hall pass?
Yeah.
For a kick in the butt? Like, how would you like me to show up for you right now? Right?
Yeah. And I like that, like right now, as opposed to just the designed alliance at the beginning of an 8-session coaching arc, but in the moment. So how would you like me to show up for you right now?
Yeah. And then one of the coaches I work with, if a client comes to the table and they haven't completed their action items, he just asks what changed.
Yeah.
But what I find, what's interesting is, I'm not big on accountability, but sometimes my clients will say that that's what they want. And so I'll say to them, what do you want me to say to you if you don't do this thing that you say you're going to do?
Yeah.
And what's fascinating and sometimes horrifying to me is what they want me to say back to them. Like, what the F is wrong with you?
Yeah.
you told me you were going to do this and I'm disappointed in you. I had to put it in quotes. I was like,
Yeah.
you told me you wanted to, because I could never say that to someone. Right. But if you ask them, hey, I hear your level of commitment here, and I hear that this is what you really want. If this doesn't happen, what do you want me to say? Well, then you're just delivering the message from themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, food for thought. And I say that not to take you off the hook, because I think you're not one to take yourself off the hook, but as a way to have you not get mixed up in the messages of what they need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because ones care very much about right action. So not only are you action oriented, you want to make sure that action is correct and perfect and fits perfectly. And that as a 3, that it's the best thing that you can do for them.
Yeah. And part of this is I look at the bulk of my work now as a team fitness coaching program that I've developed. So let's take me right now to UCLA, which is one of my top campuses. I'm working with 9 administrative leaders in a service unit, a student service unit on campus. And I'm meeting with them individually and also collectively. And not every one of them wanted coaching. So part of this is I have a champion for the program who's usually not engaged in the day-to-day, but I'm recognizing the more of this team fitness coaching I'm doing, which is largely working quite well, I think, but I feel like I'm spending a lot of energy selling coaching.
It sounds like you
Especially those
are.
first few sessions where people are intimidated, or they don't believe that I'm going to honor confidentiality through our ICF standards. So I feel like that trust building and that designing of the alliance takes a long time because they're hesitant, even cynical, and not believing that I'm here in this moment with that individual to support them and no one else.
Well, what I would offer though, if you're doing health and fitness coaching, is how much of what they don't believe in is really you
Yeah.
versus them. So, just you're showing up ready to work, but also it's like when I coach people about money, there's a lot of baggage and trauma that comes with that as a topic. So health and fitness, even if you're working with athletes trying to improve their game, there's still baggage there.
Yeah. Well, and I use the word fitness as organizations that are feeling a level of dysfunction, or they're feeling a lot of transition going on. It's the supporting the individual and at the same time helping them develop a culture of shared understanding and trust.
Sure.
So I'm brought in typically when a group of people are feeling that they don't have ground under their feet, that there isn't a lot of assurance, there's not a lot of trust, morale is not what it could be or once was. So I use the word fitness simply to attach it to habit formation, because they're all looking to develop habits, get rid of bad habits, those sorts of things. Yeah.
Sure. Well, they're not ready to move and you're ready to move, but being ready to
Don't
move
you
is
know
your
it?
strength.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's your superpower though, right? So that's what I think, kind of hopefully knowing that. I don't know if it will change your action or change your feeling about it, because you next came up as a feeling center, or what it changes for you. But I think when we're not measuring people based on our superpower, then we can be a little bit more compassionate and a little bit more patient sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
So that feeling you're talking about, and I think you said that was action is quite strong, and then feeling was second, did you say?
Yes, it's second, but it is not a close second. So your order of centers of expression are: you are ready to take action 2/3 of the time, and then the feeling and the thinking come after. So in the spirit of ready, aim, fire, you are a fire, ready, aim.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. Yep.
So talk about a change agent, especially as you're like, boom, boom, this is what we do, this is where we go. You're ready. You're ready to go.
One of the recommendations was so funny. Maybe I should consider things like doing a SWOT analysis in advance. I'm like, okay, that is so not me. Let's do a big analysis before we make the decision, because I do move quickly based on what I see, what I hear, and what's in here. And for the most part, that decision-making style has served me.
Sure, absolutely. And our default service most of the time. So you just have to see, though, is when you look at your own satisfaction and when you look at other kind of, whether it's systems or processes or things you can put in place so that you can really show up and take that action. And maybe it's even working with someone else on a team or having them fill out an intake form or doing some other work that you can just show up and boom, they're ready. They're ready to go. Because you are best, according to your assessment at least, when you can just show up and do your thing. The feeling, even with feeling, you score type 3s feel a lot on the inside, but they don't necessarily express it. And people that need to express their feelings, especially in relationship to change management, which I equate to grief, the stages of grief, that's a lot of messy stuff when you're like, well, we could just implement this, and this. And then your thinking center is 7. So you can see all the possibilities. So you can see all the possibilities and you can potentially feel all the feelings. And you likely have that organized so you can just go and drive. And so it sounds like some of it's making space for your clients, but also making space for you and your own ideas and feelings that may need safe spaces for those to process.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes 3s it'll be recommended to do kind of mindfulness or meditation because 3s can lose a sense of their kind of heart's desire. So it can be very easy to focus on what your client wants or what you need to do for your practice or how to grow things or make things better. But bringing that back to what Andy wants or what's good for you can sometimes feel more selfish or difficult or uncertain. And you are unlikely to do something selfish.
Yeah.
Or that feels selfish. I'm not saying that's selfish, but if I was like, hey, Andy, there's a difficult and uncertain thing, you're like, let's make it better. Let's go. But it's like, spend this time on you and really reflect on what you want. You have a self-preservation instinct. So you are aware that you have your own needs and those needs need to be met. But that can also be a little bit more uncomfortable for a 3, the visibility of the 3.
Okay. Yeah.
So your instincts, you scored highest as self-preservation. So self-preservations often have first aid kits, know when the snack time, where the exits are, the recognition, especially if you're scoring so high in action, you have likely a physicality and awareness of your actual needs. It may make you stronger in kind of negotiations or looking at things because you also recognize your own limitations where other 3s who do not score a self-pres may be so focused on what other people want or their performance, they may not kind of be in touch with their own level of exhaustion and their needs being met.
Okay.
Does that resonate?
It does. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then you very closely tied for the next. So you score slightly higher in social versus one-on-one. Social instinct doesn't necessarily mean you want to talk to everyone. Social instincts tend to be very good at looking at the power dynamics in the room and giving a sense of the community as a whole, whereas the one-to-one is more focused on the one-to-one relationships. So one of the examples they'll give is, if the 3 instincts go to the party, the self-pres is like, I'm going to leave at this time because I have to wake up early and I have to take a flight and I'm already packed, etc. The social looks at the room, who do I want to talk to? What do I want to get accomplished here? The one-to-one will find one person they connect with and then lose all track of time because they're connected with that person.
Yeah. Nice. I like that.
So we all have all 3 instincts. But likely we usually have one that's more kind of prominent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any relationship with the numbers 1 through 9 and the instincts? Like, is it common for a 3 to appear in self-preservation at a higher level? Is there anything that is a typical trend, I guess. If you're this 1 through 9, then you may be this.
That's a great
Self-preservation.
question. Not that I know of. I don't know that there's, I think if anyone's done research on it, it would likely be the founder of this assessment, because he is a 5, and so he digs into that data and really has looked at data from the Enneagram in a different way. So I don't think that there's necessarily a correlation. Each type has each instinct, and then you may find more of an affinity with people who are self-pres than others, because there's an understanding of the needs. So I will connect with other socials, and then I'm also a feeling center. So when I'm with someone who's a feeling center and a social, and they're more attuned to my needs, that kind of makes sense to me. Sometimes that's what I'm looking for, but as an 8, I'll show up differently as an 8 than the other social would.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's a good question. But as far as I know, I don't think that there's a certain kind of correlation. It's always interesting to me. I think that there's some things when we look at like introverted and extroverted, like how many extroverted 5s are there really? How many introverted 7s are there really? Like that's kind of an interesting, I would be fascinated if someone did a study on that. But as far as the instincts, I don't believe so.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any sense why, just based on conversations I've had with individuals lately who are very focused on their Christian faith, why Enneagram seems to be all over churches? Is that, do you hear that? Is that?
Yeah, it has to. I can't quote the historical significance off the specific references, but Enneagram tends to be one that is involved in more faith-based. You'll have more pastors. I don't know if that's the kind of history of where it comes from or the depth of the assessment, but what's interesting is you'll have some people gravitate towards it for that reason, and then you have some people who don't want to use it for that reason.
I see. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but it does, you're right. I would say of any assessment, it tends to be a more kind of faith-based assessment.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that interesting. I was talking to a couple of people that reference, oh yeah, I know Enneagram because we did it in church. And I'm like, what? Okay.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So some of the pages that I think are the most helpful in the report, so we'd already talked about page 11 because it layers your instinct and your type, and it'll have recommendations. One of the other things to look at, that some of my other favorite pages are 15 and 23. So one of those looks at your wings, and one of those looks at the lines of integration. Now, are you familiar with those things, or should I take a step back on those?
Could you take me a step back and
absolutely
give me a little bit more guidance? That's new. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So we'll start with the wings. So the numbers on either side of you. So as a 3, the numbers on either side of you are 2 or 4. Sometimes it's like one neighbor has sugar, which in case is your 2, and one neighbor has spice, and we're gonna give that to the 4.
Okay.
So
okay.
that's not always the case that one neighbor has sugar and one has spice. But what you can do is you can pull in different elements of type 2 and type 4. Those are right next to you. So for you in particular on your assessment, you scored a little bit higher in type 2 than you did for type 4. So, using your achievements for good to help, to assist others is going to be common for you. One thing to keep in mind is 2s are what's called a self-forgetting type. So you are likely to serve others and their needs more than your own. So just be mindful of that. You also scored very high in type 9, which we'll talk about in a minute. 2 and 9 are both self-forgetting types. So you have 3 doses of humility. So that is a beautiful thing. It's part of what makes you a nice person. It's part of why you're handing out hall passes, even though you're not really into hall passes, but also making sure that your own you do lean into the self-pres, that your own needs are met. We can't serve others without serving ourselves.
Okay.
So the type 4 is your creativity. Sometimes the more depth and the more painful emotions. Type 3 tend to have a strong sense of emotions, but not necessarily express them. you have people on both sides of you who are very expressive with their emotions. 2s are very outwardly loving. 4s are very internally focused on their own emotional landscape. And oftentimes 3s are like, I don't have time for all that noise, right? I don't have time for all those feelings. So you may find that you hesitate or lean into certain wings there. But those are the idea of the integrative Enneagram is the healthier we are, the more we integrate different things from different types. So it's food for thought because those 2 are right next to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then as we look at I'm looking at the document as we're talking,
Perfect.
the high, moderate, low.
Yeah. So
set up there? What's that for?
ideally you're probably integrating some of the moderates and the high without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Take a look at the low because sometimes we do pick up the shadow side and we don't realize it.
Yeah, the potential to be possible. Okay. Potential lead to preoccupation. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that the low is going to resonate, but what I'll say for myself, so for my own wing, as an 8, my choices of wing are 9 and 7.
Yeah.
And like a 7, I can see possibility and variety. And it's important to me to have things be fun, In Hogan, I'm high hedonism, like no surprise there. My website is like, whoa, there's so much going on. So you see a very strong influence of my 7 wing. At times when I feel scattered or distracted or like I'm trying to do too much, I have potentially overextended myself without a sense of my own needs, which as an 8 can be normal. I have a very low self-preservation instinct because I'm focused on social, but also 7s can get overcommitted and a bit scattered. So we don't just pick up the good stuff from our neighbors, right?
Yeah,
Some of the negative stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just something those are right next to you and can help kind of balance you out. The development of my 9 wing was more difficult for me. I think it was nice for everyone else because I got more diplomatic as opposed to just so assertive with the double assertive type of the 8 and 7. I got better at understanding and assessing kind of other people's feelings, other people's reactions.
Yeah.
But like a 9 sometimes they're so good at assessing other people's needs, they sometimes feel like they don't get to take up the space. So for me to take all of the power in 7 and 8 and then be like, oh, am I taking up too much space? I recognize that was my development of my 9 wing, but it hurt a little bit.
Okay.
So, food for thought.
Yeah.
So then the other question, more questions on wings?
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So the next, whatever page we didn't discuss, 15 or 23, the next one will give you what's called lines of integration. And so basically the Enneagram looks at it like a 3-legged stool. And so for 3, there's a natural connection with 6 and 9. And so you scored very high in type 9. So more than likely 9 and 1 for you are your second. Basically you scored highest in type 3 and then just after that type 1 and then type 9. So you likely will see a lot of characteristics based on 9. Sometimes we integrate 9 in a positive, you may be really good at seeing other people's feelings. Sometimes you may fall asleep to your own needs or not know how much kind of space to take up. So, just being mindful of that so you can be intentional about it. Do you have questions?
Is that what, so as we look at the 9, is that what we mean by stretch point?
Yeah. So in earlier Enneagram, we allegedly had one number we went to under strain and one number we went to in a positive way. So, however, with the integrative Enneagram, the idea is more holistic so that we integrate kind of both types. So based on how high you score a 9, you're likely more comfortable moving on that 9 line. Sometimes the resources that you have in your natural style don't serve. And so the integration there, making peace, seeing everyone's needs,
Mhm.
making sure all of the voices are getting heard, that's likely something you pivot into quite naturally.
Okay. Okay. And then the 6 as release point.
So you don't use your six as much. So the
Yeah.
sixes are very focused on mitigating risk. What are the potential dangers? What are the potential pitfalls? How do we prepare for those? It's kind of that what if analysis. Sixes will often have a council of advisors, and then a lot of the work for the six is trusting their own kind of inner guidance. So, because, when you ask about centers and instincts and types, because the six is a thinking type, whereas nine is a action oriented, you may be underutilizing your ability to look at what could go wrong
Mm. Mhm.
because you naturally resonate more with type seven because you look at all the things that could go right and all the possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just amazing as you're describing this so beautifully. It so aligns with my DISC assessment.
Does it?
Yeah, yeah. As the I for influencing.
Mhm.
It also ties with my saboteur assessment, and that I am a hyperachiever at
Mm.
a 9 out of 10. Yeah, I just love this, that there's so many ways to connect dots, and I'd love to, if not in 23 and 24, I'm working on this book project that I need to stay fixated on. I'd love to be able to dig into this more. It's a beautifully produced report.
Mhm.
You had said, Diana, that training is not, well, there are training programs for this,
Mhm.
but it's not mandatory for those who get into Enneagram.
Correct. If
Yeah.
you want to actually if you want to actually have this assessment that you share with clients with this particular report, and there's actually a double version of the report. So there's even more there for when you're ready. This integrative Enneagram has trainings and you get credentialed through them. However, I learned the Enneagram years before I was credentialed in anything. I think that that's one of the benefits of it. There's so many books and training, and people can be self-taught. YouTube, that's part of why I thank you for letting us record. That's my hope as well. Like, there's a lot of free information out there about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I guess I do like the idea of going through a structured certification program. It keeps me honest, it keeps me on task, keeps me in
Sure.
action, Diana, right?
You're like, let's take action. Absolutely. So one of the things, food for thought, when people are asking you a million questions and they feel like they need those answers before they can take action. And for your own personal style, you're like, we don't need to answer all these questions before you take action.
Yeah.
Leaning into your six may help you with that, because part of the ability, sixes can actually show love through risk mitigation.
Mhm.
And I have, in my career, I have a series of important sixes, and I love it because they watch my back. They're like, what about this? Okay, watch out for this. Okay, you
Mhm.
may need to revise that contract
Mhm.
over here. And it's so nice because it's not how I think about the world. So sometimes too, I think this is the value of community, is also seeing, yes, we can amplify these things in ourselves, but also seeing like who in your community kind of watched your back in that way, maybe asked all those questions, that then when you see that your clients are bringing that up, or let's ask you a million questions because they're not ready to take action yet, that you can see that actually the act of maybe asking those questions and doing that research is maybe their prerequisite for action, which might help you be a little bit more, I don't know if you're looking to be more patient, but that might help the process be smoother for you.
Okay. Okay. So is the integrated Enneagram one of a variety of flavors of Enneagram? Is this the most robust or the newest or what makes it different?
Yeah, so I think what I would say about it, just from my experience, knowing that there are a lot of training schools, What I find impressive is honestly the integration of the components. So some of what we were talking about, we've talked about the instincts, which a lot of that is based on Beatrice Chestnut's research. We've
Yes.
talked about, how you scored highest in 1, 3, and 7 in what's called what another author calls the tri-type. So there's a fascinating kind of integration of a lot of different components of it. So I do really like their approach. What I also like is that their approach is ICF approved. There's data behind it. There's a beautiful assessment. They do reports for teams and things like that. There are other providers out there. One, I believe, I want to say it's called Narrative Enneagram, where they do panel work and you listen to panel, which I love. I love hearing the different voices.
Yeah.
So I think, and then the wisdom of the Enneagram is one of the probably initial and original assessments. So there's different programs. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for. I would say from a data-driven perspective and for use in organizations, in my opinion, and to be focused on coaches and training coaches how to use it versus just here's what the Enneagram is and understand yourself. I believe integrative Enneagram is superior.
And it's integrated. And that is a website with all sorts of information about what
Absolutely. Yeah, they're South Africa based, and they normally, right now, I think the majority of the trainings are still virtual. But it's but they do have, hopefully as things open back up, we'll be in person again soon.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So a
Yeah.
couple more things about you.
Yeah.
So one of the things we look at is kind of how you get your own needs met. And as a 3, you're more likely to be assertive, to say, hey, this is a good idea. I want that, action oriented. Other ways of looking at that, how people get what they want. Sometimes people are compliant and sometimes people are withdrawn. So one of the activities it sounds like they do with this is that they have the assertive people walk around the room, the compliant people follow them, and the withdrawn people stand in the corner.
Okay.
So I offer that because 3s, like 7s and 8s, are assertive type. We're more likely to say what we want, ask for what we want. Sometimes that can be a blind spot when you're working with people who are more compliant or tend to be more withdrawn, because it's like, well, why didn't you just tell me that you wanted that thing? Now, with feeling center being your second, you're likely, and having such a high action center, you're likely to kind of intuitively get that and intuitively understand. But sometimes that can potentially be a source of frustration because you're like, hey, this is a safe space, just ask me. And that may not be something that someone else is willing or ready to do.
Okay.
But also can help that if and when the directness that is likely your primary strategy is not serving you, you can consider flipping into compliance or withdrawn. And, I talked to a 9 and I was like, how is withdrawing a strategy? Right? Like, teach me your ways, 9. And he was like, well, the river erodes the rock. And it's true. Like, sometimes the 9s won't answer right away. And by the time they get back, the situation has resolved itself.
Okay.
Right? Or sometimes they won't jump into the fray. Whereas the compliant types are more likely to go along to get along. That, to me, I find myself, I'm most comfortable with assertive types because to me, it feels more honest. Well, it probably feels more honest because I'm an assertive type.
Yes.
And so for me, if you're not telling me what you want, why are you wasting my time? Like, tell me what you want. Like, if you don't get it, like, we're going to negotiate, we're going to hash that out. But I work mostly with compliant types who want me to be happy, and me saying, well, I want you to tell me what you want so that I'll be happy. That doesn't always, trying to get them to change that strategy. We both have to move.
You both have to move. Okay.
Yeah. Because, I was having this conversation. I work with so many 2s, bless the 2s. I love them. And my thing is like, oh, say no, say it to my face. Like 8's like at best when you like hit them straight between the eyes with it, right? And that's hard for compliant types. And 2s want to take care of people. They want to anticipate their needs. So like a direct no, especially to an 8, even when the 8 loves you, can be difficult. And I was like, well, if I really want it, I'm gonna negotiate anyway, right? Like, say no. When you say no and I want something, that's just your initial stance.
That's right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and if I really want that, like we're gonna have words about that. And this too was like, yeah, and we can't, that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot for someone who's compliant that they're
Mhm.
gonna have to say no to me at least twice.
Yeah.
But that's important reflection for me because if I don't look at it from their perspective, I don't understand why people aren't just being direct with me. Well, because that's the strategy I'm comfortable with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I think the thing is that when people look at diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice, there's a lot of focus on demographic, which there needs to be, right? There's systemic needs for that. Also, though, around communication, around style, there's a lot of conflict that just comes from kind of lack of understanding.
Mhm.
So, as far as kind of when you don't get what you want, when it doesn't go your way, you're more likely to be competent. Then positive outlook, you are not likely to react. So that's something that's kind of, I'm not surprised because threes naturally score high in assertive and competent. You're just going to make the most of it. Like if it all goes to hell in a handbasket, you're going to be, shoveling the coal and the water, and you're just going to make that work.
Yeah, I
Um,
guess, but I also go into the corner and lick my wounds.
oh, okay.
So that doesn't seem to play with what you're suggesting here, because um I do have a tendency to be easily bruised when
Mm,
things don't go my way.
mm,
And
okay.
so though I am not reactive, I do not demonstrate to people my disappointment.
Okay.
I
Well,
I have I do my own little pity party. Yeah.
there's your withdrawal
Mm.
and self-preservation.
Okay. Okay.
And I actually think you can call it a pity party, but it is often hard for threes to recognize that they have needs.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I
So,
I'm receiving that. Yeah, I get that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, look at that, but you are, and I would say, I highly doubt that you would throw your quote pity party until the show had successfully launched.
Sure. Yes.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, I
Mm.
think you'd probably get the thing off the ground.
Yeah.
And then when you had a moment, you would take a moment to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. An
That's good.
8 will flip over the table. It's not our it's not people's favorite thing about us, right? And then positive outlook is just like looking at the bright side all the time. You're more likely to make sure that the show goes on and
Mm.
then make space for your feelings when you feel safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So there's a lot here. Thoughts
It's
from
this
you.
this is fantastic. There is a lot here. I love the way this is layered. I love how, to your point, there's a connection with what's instinctive. I like the concept of the wings that I've heard people talk about. So thanks for that explanation.
Sure.
And I geek out on the beautiful presentation in the report too.
Yeah.
Just as something that is shared with a client, that is a lot of information, but delivered in a way that it doesn't read overwhelming. I think to lay clients that are like, too many charts and graphs and so forth, that it's pretty clean. Yeah, I'd really, really like to learn more about this. So I wanna ponder this and find out what next steps might be at the right time. Right now, I'm all in for this book that I'm writing. So talk about inaction. Yeah, thank you. It's my first draft will be delivered the end of February, so I'm getting close.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Great.
This has been a long time in coming, like my whole adult life. So it's a big deal for me.
I'm excited for you.
Yeah. How are
Yeah.
things going with you?
Good. Well, here, I'm going to stop us there
No,
unless
okay.
there's any more that you want to say.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.